Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is actually going to be a run through of the books that I read in 2017. I track all the books that I read on Goodreads and it showed that I read 50 books this year. I probably read just a little bit more, just including poetry books, but I don't record all of them on Goodreads. Sometimes I'm just being lazy. So this video is going to be hopefully really short, and I'm just going to go through each and every single book, just like this is the book I read, and say yay or nay. And then on the screen I'll give the rating that I gave it on Goodreads as well, and then I'll leave all my details of Goodreads below so you can follow me on there and just see what I thought of all the books. I need to keep an eye on my phone just because I need to refer to Goodreads so I know what books I actually read. Actually, one thing before we get started, looking back at the books that I read made me realise how much of a Kindle convert I've become. I really didn't think that would happen, but I have I have less physical books now, and most of these books I obviously read them on my Kindle because I can't find them, or I'm just being super lazy and I don't know where they are. But yeah, so if I have the physical copy I will show it. If I don't, I'll probably just see the picture on the screen. Okay, so the first book that I read at the beginning of 2017 was The Perfect Girl by Gilly Macklin. I can't even remember what the book was about now. Actually, no, I do vaguely remember what the book is about. This girl comes out of prison and then her mum dies. It tells you at the back of the book anyway. Can't remember how I thought about it. I'll say yay, because it wasn't awful. The second book I read was We Are Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Joy Fowler. I actually really like this book. I remember this book. I don't think I can say what it's about without spoiling it, because I'm pretty sure it doesn't say what it is on the back. But I really enjoyed this book, so I'm going to say yay, and I'm pretty sure I gave it like a 3 out of 5 on Goodreads. One of the books I read was Do Disrupt, Change the Status Quo or Become It. It's one of those businessy books, and you're supposed to change your mindset on things, and it's supposed to get you being a bit more productive. I enjoyed it. I now have a physical copy of it, I just don't know where it is, if I'm honest with you. It was okay, but to be honest, after I read it, I've never read it again. I've just never put it to use. I then know that I started to read this sort of 4-part series. At the time when I started to read it, only one was published, and it was called The Year of Saying Yes. I really liked it because it was a good time to read it in January. It's really funny, and I know that every single one of the books I found really enjoyable. I think just the first and second one I really enjoyed the most. So there's a part 1, 2, 3 and 4, and they just came out throughout, I think, January and February maybe time. So I read all 4 of those books this year. The next book I read is The Girls by Emma Cline, and I have a physical copy of it. Yay! This book was long. I don't really like this book. I don't really like these sort of culty, girly books of just random things happening in America and people doing random things. It's a bit like Helter Skelter. It's a bit like that. Wasn't a huge fan of it, if I'm honest. The next book I read was The Essex Serpent. Oh my gosh. This book was so dull for me. I really didn't understand why I know it warns them all or something, and it was really popular at the beginning of last year. I did not enjoy it, did not like it. The next book was I Take You. I'm struggling to remember what this book was about. If I'm thinking of the right book, then I know I didn't really like it. Actually, I remember what the book is about this girl who's about to get married, and her husband are so strange. Well, her soon-to-be husband. Just weird. I would not recommend this book. It was a complete waste of my time. The next book was Hungry, the Stars and Everything. I know this book was about eating food. Other than that, I'm not really too sure what it was about. I wasn't a huge fan of it. I know that. I barely even remember what the book was about. But wasn't too much of a fan. The next book I read was The Edible Woman by Margaret Atwood. I actually thought I'd read this before, but I have read this before, and it also reminds me of a different book I've read before. So I read this again. I think the reason I read this again is because The Handmaid's Tale was being made into a TV series, or it was into a TV series. I'm not too sure. Oh, I said I wouldn't explain what the books are about just so that I wouldn't ruin them for people, also that this video wouldn't be too long, but I really like this book. Definitely encourage people to go and read it. So the next book that I read, which I think is really similar to The Girls, is Girls on Fire. Again, I'm just not a fan of these books of girls that just sort of are loners and then find these other girls and do sort of crazy mad shit. I'm just not a fan. I remember I thought this book was so boring. This one isn't even to do with like her finding like a group of people, it's just one friend. It was just very fucking random. I mean, anyone who's read it, I think, is going to agree with me. Definitely a thumbs down for me. So after that, I just really wanted to read some books that were quite light and just not too heavy. So I started reading a couple of books by Mike Gale. I'm not sure how I stumbled across him. Probably Amazon just recommended him to me as per usual. So the book I read was The Life and Soul of the Party. I remember this book. I don't want to say the bit that I remember because it might spoil it, but very interesting. I liked it. It was a nice, refreshing read. Then I went on to read. You'll see why I said see in a second. Seeing Other People. The title is really clever because once you read the book you see what it's about, but I found this book really boring. Like, I would not read it again. I would not even recommend it. Whereas I would recommend The Life and Soul of the Party. It's Not Me, It's You. I liked this book. It was a nice, again, feel-good read. It's a bit refreshing. Yeah, it was nice. I'd recommend it. I then decided I wanted to get back into reading something a bit more serious and deep. I started to read the My Brilliant Friend series by Elena Ferrante. I'm not sure if people are aware, but it was either in 2017 or the end of 2016 because Elena Ferrante is a pseudonym. I think she's an Italian writer because the book is definitely Italian. It's a pseudonym and someone found out who she was even though she really wanted her privacy and yada 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 yada. So off the back of that is kind of what got me started down that road of, ooh, I want to read her books now. So I actually read My Brilliant Friend and then read The Story of a New Name, which is the second book, so there's 4 books in the series. I then just kind of stopped reading it. I actually wanted to do a review of the 4 books, but the books are long. It's not that they're not interesting, they're just really long. Like, I feel like books 1 and 2 could have been one book, but they're very intricate stories. They're good. They feel real. The next book I read was The Jellicoe Road. I can't remember it too well. It's one of those books I know I wanted to read from when I was younger. I sort of class it in that sort of Girl Interrupted, The One Who Flew Away from the Cuckoo's Nest, that sort of genre to do with mental health and like sort of American mental health and things like that. Except this one isn't set in a mental institution from what I remember. But it's still sort of that young adult genre and to do with all those sort of things. It was okay. Glad I read it, wouldn't read it again. Again, I read another book by Mike Gale which is called Turning 40. It's about, I know it's done in series, so I think there's a turning 30, turning 40, maybe there's a turning 20, I don't know, or maybe there's a turning 50. It follows this guy throughout like the different birthday milestones that he hits. It was okay. The next book I read was Look at Me. I can't remember what this is about, so I'm going to have to read it. But yeah, I now do remember this book. I actually really liked this book. It was a bit weird, because I was just a bit like, why can't the main character just get over it? But it was good. I definitely recommend that people should read this book. The next book I read is We Are All Weird. I work in marketing and I'm really interested in all things marketing, and I used to read his name is Seth Godin, his little blog where he sends you snippets every day, but then I stopped because I was just infatuated with them all the time. But yeah, I actually purchased the book. It's just this little thing. And it's just about like different tribes, and so it's called We Are All Weird, The Rise of Tribes and the End of Normal. And it's just a really small book. And it's just to do with sort of marketing, advertising, that sort of thing. And just sort of how we're marketing to people and do we need to do something different? And yeah, all that good stuff. The book after that I read was The Girl from Nowhere by Dorothy Coomson. Dorothy Coomson is one of my favourite authors. I really, really like books from her. I have a lot of books from her on my bookshelf. She's also from Ghana. I'm from Ghana. And I just really enjoy her books. They're a really good read. They always have a little bit of a twist, and yeah, they usually also take place in like Brighton and Hove and things like that, so it's a bit close to home. And yeah, they're just really enjoyable reads. Hi! I'm just going to quickly put it out there that this is the next day because my camera ran out of battery and the lighting was just going down so badly that I just thought I'll just film it another day. So, quick disclaimer, and I just hope now everything is still in focus. I've kept all the settings and fingers crossed. So I'm just going to jump back into where I left off. I know I was talking about Dorothy Coomson and The Girl from Nowhere. I think what I was saying about that was that I really like that she bases her books in like Brighton and Hove, because it's quite close to home, and that in a lot of her books she focuses on race, not in that sort of sense where it's about like racism, but the main characters are usually black. I think from reading books you can't really tell sometimes until you get to a certain point. You're like, oh, but I like that because representation matters. So for me, I really like her books anyway. They're really interesting. The next book I read was Outliers. This book is more of a book of research and studies put together, and it's about like how people succeed and sort of I guess people who are on, not in the normal spectrum, so people who are on the outside of it, and how these people manage to succeed and how they go about in life and the different things that they do. I really enjoyed this book. It was really nice to read. I like these little self-help books and things like that, so definitely recommend reading that book. It's great. So the next book I read was Hot Milk, which was one of the books that was shortlisted for the Man Booker 2016 prize. So I started reading all the books from there, and you'll see in that video that obviously I didn't like that book. My thoughts are still the same. Didn't like the book. Wouldn't recommend it. The next book I read was Bossy Pants. I think it's called Bossy Pants. Yeah, by Tina Fey. I've just always wanted to read it. So I'm not the hugest fan of Tina Fey and like Amy Poehler and Schuler. I think some of their stuff is funny, but I'm not like an avid fan. But she's funny in Mean Girls and some other shows that I've seen her in. So I just really wanted to read it, and her book was actually really good. It was really, really funny. So I'd definitely recommend reading that for a bit of a light read and things like that. And also, I haven't really watched SNL that much, but it was good to see how her time there came about and what she did and things like that, so really recommend that. The next book I read was Do Not Say We Have Nothing. Again, I talked about this in my Man Booker 2016 video. I liked this book. It was a bit of a long read, I'm not gonna lie. It's not something I would usually pick up, which is why I'm glad I did sort of pick up books from the shortlist. I'd recommend it to people, but yeah, it's not like my favourite book. I then went on to read Milk and Honey, so definitely last year was the year that I got back into poetry. And obviously Rupi Kaur has been super popular on Instagram for years, but I think with the release of her new book, like it really just came about again, and I was like, let me get some copies of her book. So I actually got it on my Kindle, and now I actually have an actual physical copy. So yeah, I just loved it so much that I was just like, let me just get myself an actual physical copy, because I think with poetry books it's really nice on the Kindle to have access to it straight away, but it's also nice to have a physical copy and just be able to read it and take it away with you and like lend it to people as well. So yeah, got that. Also read The Sun and Her Flowers. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It's not actually down on my Goodreads, but I know I definitely read that when it came out. So that was great. The next book I read was Eileen again. So basically the next couple of books I read were from the Man Booker shortlist 2016. So I read Eileen, I read All That Man Is, His Bloody Project, and The Sellout. Eileen, didn't like. All That Man Is, liked. His Bloody Project, loved it. The Sellout, didn't like it. But I would just refer you to my other video to see like my full sort of thoughts and review and my review on each of the books. The next book I read was Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. I know this actually won, I think, the thriller section in Goodreads. And I knew I'd read it, so I had to click on it to be like, what was this book about again? What was this book about again? Compared to Girl on the Train, I think it's really bad to always like when an author has a really standout book, especially when it's been heavily publicised and it's made into a film, to compare their previous book to it, but that's what you do, because that's what you have to, that's the comparison, like that's how you say, was it good, was it bad, because you base it off of growth. I wasn't a fan, I couldn't even remember what it was about when I read it. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Didn't really like it. Was not a fan of the ending at all. So the next book I read after was This Beautiful Life. Such a lovely book, such a nice little touching heartfelt book. I just wanted something light after reading all the stuff in the Man Booker's shortlist. So I read that, really recommend it if you're into sort of those sort of soppy life. I really recommend it.